We spoke yesterday to Carmen Reinhart. She's known, of course, as you just alluded to her work with Kenneth Rogoff, looking at the history of financial crises, but also more recently at work that suggests that countries should be concerned about debt-to-GDP ratios greater than 90%. That, unfortunately, has given her a bit of a reputation as a champion of austerity. That's not completely true. Mike, that's something that she's been working on for a while. She really thinks that countries should be creative with non-austerity ways to get rid of their debt loads.
And, a couple of years ago, she told me here that the United States was going to come out of this very slowly. That's what her work with Ken Rogoff showed, that it might be several years before the United States returned to normal. Well, now she says we are finally getting the Great Recession past us, but that doesn't mean we're going to be returning to a pre-recession economy.
If you look at periods where advanced economies, the U.S., the U.K., France, Europe at large, after World War II, everybody had high debt. Real interest rates were very low for extended periods of time. So for the past few years, I've been saying, look, I think expecting the economy to return to those norms, 3% real rates, which were not exceptional prior to the crisis. I think that's not the world that we're going to be living in for some time.
She sounds gloomy, but there is some good news, Brennan. Of course, she told us that the United States, at least, is ahead of the rest of the world in recovery.
And, of course, we talked also to her about Greece and Germany. She doesn't have any confidence that there will be an actual nominal haircut there. She says it's really necessary to have an actual haircut and not just a extend the maturities and pretend haircut, because if you actually reduce the amount owed, some good things that happen. This is what she said about Greece.
If you are a citizen of that country and your money is outside of that country, this is very much the situation in Greece. We know that there's a lot of Greek wealth outside of the country. If you think that there's this debt burden in the out years, that probably means at some point some form of tax liability you face, or some even worse, confiscation. Not unheard of. If those risks lie ahead of you, is that an inducement for you to invest in your own country?
And we really talked about Greece for a while, and the basic message is extending and pretending is not doing a very good job of pretending. Actual haircuts need to happen.
I look, Brendan, at the challenges that are in Jackson Hole, and I go to the history that Michael McKee knows of Jackson Hole. Mike, there's a lot of green shirts this year out of Jackson Hole. We've heard of the protests, including the laureate Joe Stiglitz and Brad DeLong of Berkeley. Give us the color and nature of the protests and how they've disrupted the meetings.
Well, the good news is they haven't disrupted the meetings. They've been very present but very polite about what they're doing here. It's a little confusing about what they're doing here, though, Tom. They want to be able to keep the Fed on hold. They don't want the Fed to raise interest rates. They say too far, too fast. But the Fed says they're not going to raise interest rates too far, too fast. So, Brendan, what case they're making isn't exactly clear.
Right. And, I spoke to Brad DeLong about this yesterday. And basically, they're worried, and I think justifiably so, that economic policy tends to affect minority communities much greater than it does the country as a whole. But then they go to the Fed for relief because Congress basically isn't working. I asked Brad DeLong if you could ask the Fed to do one thing other than keep the federal funds rate at the zero bound, what would it be? This is what he said.
I would like to see would be much more focus on the unbanked in America today. Especially if you drive down, say, start at Esther George's kind of relatively new Federal Reserve Bank in near Crown City in Kansas City and drive south along Main Street. And you find yourself passing check cashing shop, car loan shop, payday loan shop. Something like a quarter of the population of Kansas City really doesn't have cheap and reliable access to the banking system.
And, Tom, this is a meeting of bankers, central bankers, and also from presidents of the Federal Reserve. That quote, to me, goes to the heart of what a Federal Reserve Bank actually can do outside of voting on the federal funds rate.